Hello and welcome to the Soccer Business Podcast. I'm Simon Evans, and this is a little bit different from our previous podcasts where we've done an in-depth dive into one particular topic with a particular guest. This time we're starting our first news podcast where we look at what's been going on over the last week or so in the world of North American soccer business. And I'm delighted that joining me for this first edition of the Soccer Business News podcast is Jonathan Tannenwald, Soccer Correspondent with the Philadelphia Inquirer. Jonathan, thanks very much for joining us.
Simon, it's great to be here. You and I have known each other for a long time, so I'm always happy to come on. I have my mug of Yorkshire tea in your honor. So
excellent. Early start because we've both been very busy with Club World Cup. It's been a tournament that's grabbed a lot of attention, particularly quite a lot of attention from people who say they don't care about it, who seem to be writing an awful lot about how much they don't care about it. You've been watching games in Philadelphia. I've been in Miami. I'm really conscious that my experience in Miami isn't the whole story. It's been extremely positive in Miami, but around the country we've seen a mixed bag of attendances and interest levels and so on. What's it been like in Philadelphia?
Well, I think it's been very positive in Philadelphia, and I am as skeptical of FIFA's motives and all of these things and the excessive workload on the players. I'm as cynical and skeptical as everybody else is about this. But in Philadelphia specifically, where we don't get as often the major international exhibitions and tournaments that come through as, say, Dallas or Houston or New York or Atlanta or Miami when it comes to the exhibitions, right? We didn't have the Copa America last year, haven't had the Gold Cup since 2019. Philadelphia needed a dress rehearsal for the World Cup next year. From a logistical and operations perspective, in terms of the public transport, certainly, security things, hotels, how people were moving around town, the restaurants, and then from the cultural perspective of people who live here, who are football fans or the NFL, I mean football, right? Fans, baseball fans, basketball fans, who aren't really as engaged in soccer, to see what the cultural side of the sport is all about. And that was the part that we hadn't really had in town before. Had a lot of games, big European teams come play exhibition one-offs in the summer and whatnot. But the cultural part hadn't happened until now. And on Monday, before the Flamengo Esperance game, a few hundred or so Flamengo fans went up the top of the Art Museum steps, which your international listeners who've seen the Rocky movies will know that's the famous Philadelphia Museum.
Everyone does that photo when they go to Philadelphia. Yeah.
Right. So they're up the top of the Art Museum steps, and they brought all their drums and their flags and everybody else. And you and I know, Simon, how big Flamengo's fan base is in the Americas. But people in Philadelphia who only watch European soccer might not have known about it. And that was the moment when they saw it. And that was finally the cultural moment with the sport that the city hadn't had yet. And that night, the atmosphere for Flamengo versus Esperance, two teams that people might not think much of if all you watch again is European soccer. But the atmosphere was phenomenal. It was loud. Both fan base. Esperance flew, 3,000 fans over from Tunisia who came for the game. They were all into it the whole time. Everybody I know who went had just loved it. And then yesterday we had Manchester City and Wydad of Morocco. And I would say there were 2,000 or 3,000 Wydad fans. A few from Morocco, 1,000 or so is what I saw, and a lot of more couldn't get visas who wanted to come. And then from New York and Washington and everywhere else around the United States where there's the diaspora. And there were, 37,000 fans there yesterday, I think it was.
And the kickoff time was pretty early, yeah?
Was noon on a weekday.
Yeah.
And we can certainly get into that. But the Wydad fans, and their 2,000 or 3,000, were far louder than all the Manchester City fans who were in the building.
It's interesting you talk about the cultural side of it, because I've been talking to a few people about what the World Cup's going to be like and what kind of things people should be ready, in the business community, in the local cities and so on. And the point I keep making to them is that it's actually a festival of fan culture as much as it is a competition on the field. And anyone who's been to a World Cup knows that the memories you take back, of course, you remember Dennis Bergkamp's great goal or whatever it is that you see in that tournament. But you also, above all, remember seeing, people from Africa dancing in the street with people from Scotland, people drinking in this pub and mixing, and the people that you meet from all over the world. It really is an extraordinary event like that. And I wasn't sure if the Club World Cup was going to bring that, but it's interesting what you say about Philadelphia there, because we had, of course, Boca Juniors in Miami. And
Nothing better.
The Banderazzo that they did, and they're doing another one ahead of the Bayern Munich game on Friday. They had thousands of people down the beach. It was incredible viral content for the tournament, actually. But it was also, a real reminder. They brought 50,000 people to that stadium. I mean, there was a 55,000 attendance. At least 50,000 of them were Boca Juniors fans. There was a very tiny amount of Benfica supporters. And it was incredible. It really was. And people who, talking to some of the staff at the stadium who'd never seen anything like this before at all, the entire stadium. And I don't think, even when the Dolphins have been on occasions in good form, I don't think the volume levels have ever reached those levels there. So that's a really interesting side of it. And I think the criticisms we've seen from it will not get into the sort of overarching critique of the tournament and whether it should even exist or not. But the criticism of the actual existing tournament as it's going on at the moment has been focused on a few games where there have been really poor attendances in a few. One of them was one that every single person who wrote a preview of the tournament said, good luck trying to sell tickets for Ulsan versus Mamelodi Sundowns in Orlando. No surprise that was a 3,000 attendance, and it seemed like that might have even been a generous assessment. But also that Atlanta game, which drew a lot of ire from the British press in particular, because Chelsea were playing in it. It was actually 27,000 on a workday afternoon in Atlanta involving two teams. Now, that's not a bad crowd if you're playing it in a 30,000 stadium. The problem is, of course, it was in a giant Mercedes-Benz stadium, which is an NFL venue that holds, if I think, around 70,000.
70, yeah. And my reaction to seeing that was two parts. One, remember, LAFC wasn't in the tournament until June 1st.
Right.
So their fans who might have traveled in more than 150, who, they didn't have time to take off work, buy flights, buy hotels, do all the other things to get down there, right? And if they'd been in from the start, or who knows what, if they had 2 months instead of 2 weeks, perhaps more of them would have gone, because everybody, for people who are international listening and watching this, Atlanta has become a great soccer destination in the United States. They've got a big fan base, and they've got unbelievable stadiums. Everybody wants to go see a game there. And I would think that more LAFC fans would have gone if there had been time to plan and book and take off work and do all these other things.
Well, we've seen them travel before in CONCACAF action. We've seen they took a huge following to Costa Rica and other places. So, yeah, there's reasonable grounds for thinking that, I think.
And the second part is, if you're going to play a game in the afternoon on a working day, which we all understand that the television considerations and all that, we all understand why. Make the tickets $30 and tell everybody to come on down and have a good time. Don't make it $100 or whatever it was out of the gate, and then they go up and down with this dynamic ticket pricing, and a lot of them went down. Make it $30 from the start for the afternoon games, so that soccer fans who live in the Atlanta area, and there are plenty of them, want to go to the game, enjoy the afternoon, watch Chelsea, maybe root for the underdog LAFC from MLS to try to pull off the upset.
Yeah, I think the ticket thing is an interesting one, and it's going to be one of the key learnings I think FIFA have to take from this. We also saw Seattle Sounders. The attendances there weren't bad, but they were also, it struck me watching it, a little bit less than they would normally get for MLS in terms of the Sounders support. And part of that is the midweek. We know MLS fans don't like midweek games as much as they like their Saturday nights. But also I think the ticket prices has to come into it, because even though dynamic pricing has worked in the sense that low demand lowers the price, and then that maybe boosts demand back up a little bit, or boost take up back up. When you set the ticket price too high at the start, a lot of people, I think, just switch off from it. Right?
Correct.
They don't.
Absolutely.
Not everyone is tracking those prices till it gets to that sweet point where they think, okay, I'll go. And you get in places like Miami, where people make last-minute decisions about attending events all the time, you can recover from that. In some markets, you can't. And it seems like in Seattle, perhaps, the crowd's not that bad. Again, they're not that bad. And we see crowds drop off for wild card playoff games in a midweek as well.
Right.
But still, you would have thought that game against Botafogo would have brought a bigger number.
And I think that when people hear the phrase dynamic pricing, they only think of concerts and everything else that there's ever been with dynamic pricing, where the price has only gone up.
Yeah.
Right? This is the first time for a major event where it's gone down.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's going to go down next year.
No.
But then again, Philadelphia is another.
Some games that are the equivalent of that Ulsan Sundowns match.
And this has been my criticism, and Simon, you know this as well as anybody. This has been my criticism of FIFA with this for a year now. They really have not done the marketing work necessary. They've done it for about the last month or so, maybe. But
in the local markets, you mean?
Right. They needed to be doing it for a year, because when you bring an event to the United States, no matter what it is, you can't just rock up and say, here we are, the building will be full. Because America is the most crowded sports marketplace in the world, because you have baseball, the NFL, the NBA, ice hockey, the WNBA, which is successful, women's soccer is popular. Everything is going on all the time. And on top of that, even the NFL, when it is out of season, which it is out of season now, it still commands the headlines every single day and does all of the marketing work year-round, which forces the NBA and Major League Baseball and all the other leagues to catch up. And Major League Baseball, even, despite being, one of the most famous and significant of the American sports, Major League Baseball can't keep up with the NFL marketing-wise. It's not close.
Yeah.
So if they can't, then you have to get on that treadmill and do the work.
Well,
I don't think FIFA did the work.
I think one of the things that was really difficult for them to do in this market, not only the competition from other sports, but also the history of international soccer tournaments in the US, where people know the World Cup is different from all the rest of the things. But this is a new tournament called the Club World Cup. We've had tournaments here with names like International Champions Cup, right? That doesn't sound too different from the World Club Cup. There's been things here in the past, and those have been practically friendly exhibition tournaments, yeah? And so to convince people in this market that this is a real thing, they had to do a lot of work, I think. And they did it at the top level. We saw a lot of stuff going out on social media and a lot of, FIFA promoting it, Infantino doing the tours and everything. But you have to do more, I think you're right, than that trophy visit to each location and one story. It's that constant stuff targeting the local markets, isn't it?
And I think, as I said, I think they started late with ramping it up relative to what it could have been. And I think also, this is something that I noticed here yesterday. I got an email from the local World Cup organizing committee saying that they were offering 1,000 for Juventus Widad on Sunday. They were offering 1,000 tickets to local youth and amateur soccer organizations. And there's a discount for families with children under age 16. And they put a lot of the tickets on discounted sale, which of course is a sign that they're not selling, right?
Yeah.
But even when the big international tournaments come here, certainly when MLS games are, or when there are U.S. national team games, they do group sales to the local youth soccer clubs. To my knowledge, FIFA did not do that at any kind of scale. Maybe I'm wrong, and somebody will tell me if I'm wrong, and they'll get in touch. I didn't see or hear much about it. I mean, I knew what one of the regional youth soccer governing bodies was certainly promoting it, but I didn't see very much in terms of
there's
group
been
sales to youth
partnerships with,
teams and stuff like that.
in Miami, they did a big partnership with Miami-Dade College, which was based around giving students the opportunity
Right.
to volunteer as well, and involved that 4-for-1 ticket deal and so on and so forth. I think on the attendances, to balance it a little bit, we've seen some fantastic attendances as well. I mean, 80,000,
and we will hear tomorrow for Chelsea Flamengo.
Right, and again here tomorrow for Boca Juniors versus Bayern Munich,
right.
which I think will be a sellout. But you see the attendance at the Rose Bowl for the early game that there was between PSG and Atletico Madrid. Even 40,000 on a midweek night for Monterrey versus Inter Milan is not a bad crowd. I mean, a lot of this discussion, when people see empty seats, and this again is a cultural differences, Europeans see empty seats and they think flop. Americans see empty seats and they're like, did they close off the top tier? We're used to seeing stadiums for soccer when they're played in NFL games not be 70,000 but be 45,000 or that kind of thing. And the problem is, and this will be an issue I think at the World Cup, that if you look at the stadium inventory in the United States, we have brilliant soccer-specific stadiums now around 22 to 26,000 capacity, and then we have brilliant NFL stadiums that are like 60 to 70,000 capacity. There's nothing really in between unless you start going to certain college venues that don't feel like realistic locations for international soccer.
And ironically enough, so like the most famous soccer venue in the country is the Rose Bowl, right?
Yeah.
The second most famous for many years was in my hometown of Washington, D.C., RFK Stadium.
Yeah.
Which was 55,000. And in that regard, it was the perfect size.
Yeah.
Because you could put 25,000 in the lower deck for a D.C. United game and have a great atmosphere. And you could fill the place for a U.S. national team, and the place would be off the charts. You went there, I'm sure, many times for big games over the years.
Yeah,
yeah. We don't build 55,000 seat stadiums anymore in the United States. But I think the answer to that is the games should be at the NFL stadiums. Like Palmeiras Porto was a great example. There were 40,000, and I saw a bunch of people saying, oh, that game should be played in Red Bull Arena. It's now called Sports Illustrated Stadium instead of the Meadowlands. And my response was, no, there were 40,000 people there. It should not be in the MLS stadium. That's a much bigger crowd than the NFL, than the MLS stadium can hold. The answer is lower the ticket prices so that the casual soccer fans in all the markets will go, and it's a 50,000 crowd instead of a 40,000 crowd.
Yeah, yeah. I think looking ahead to the World Cup a little bit, Jonathan, there's going to be, and we won't find out until the draw happens in December ahead of that tournament, which does reduce the runway for doing this. But there are going to be, with a 48-team World Cup, there are going to be some games that you look at and you think, that's a tough sell. There's going to be games, on the West Coast between Norway and a team from Africa or something like that. Yeah, there's going to be those kind of games.
You want a good one? If we look at some of the Asian teams that are first-time qualifiers already, right, that are not huge. So I'm going to pick on Uzbekistan unfairly, and I'm going to pick on Jamaica because Andre Blake, who's their goalkeeper, is the captain of the Philadelphia Union, and I know him, so I think I can get away with it.
Okay.
Jamaica draws Uzbekistan, and that game's in Dallas at a 90,000-seat Cowboys stadium. Right?
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah.
But the answer is make the tickets to that game cheaper. And don't put them at $120 or whatever it's going to be right out of the gate.
Yeah. And maybe you have to market games like that differently. Maybe you have to market them as that festival of fan culture, as something more than just a game, because you're not going to be able to market it around stars, which is what American sports so often falls back on in marketing terms. Is it's going to be this player against this player. Well, you're not doing that with Uzbekistan against Jamaica. I mean, it's laughable sometimes when you see the TV networks doing that for games with some of these smaller teams, and just pick somebody from Al Ahly and turn them into a star on the par with Messi or something.
And look, if Jamaica's playing in Philadelphia or New York instead, it's a different story because that's where their expat population is. If Japan's playing in Seattle or Los Angeles, they're going to draw. If South Korea is playing in Los Angeles or New York, they're going to draw. But if you've got two teams that don't have big expat populations in the United States and don't have stars, and they're stuck in a place where what expat populations there are not in those communities.
Yeah.
That's when you're going to have a problem.
Yep. Yep. I'm not sure what they can do about something like that in Dallas, other than, as you say, sell tickets very, very cheap or almost give them away, because they're not going to move it to the MLS stadium in Dallas area.
Because people, soccer fans in whatever city, certainly in Philadelphia, because I get asked already all the time, how can I get tickets for the World Cup next year? I'm like, I don't know, and I don't know if I ever will, because whenever they go, I've told people, whenever they go on sale, if you don't buy them, somebody else will.
Yeah.
For the most part. So I don't know, but they want the soccer fans in the United States. They want to go to a game, and they will go to a World Cup game. Just to be there, because they want to be there, right?
Yeah.
But they don't want to get socked on the nose price-wise to do it.
Absolutely. Let's look at another tournament that's been going on at the same time. I mean, the Gold Cup, people have questioned whether there would be interest in the Club World Cup. I don't think there's even a debate about that anymore. I think there was interest, and I think people care about it. The clubs that are involved care about it. The players on the field, in my opinion, are giving 100% to trying to win those games. It doesn't feel like a friendly thing at all. The other question that was raised was, would it cannibalize the Gold Cup? Let's look at that a little bit, because it does feel like the attention has been taken heavily away from the Gold Cup. What's your feelings on that?
I think it has, but I think that part of the reason why is the state that the United States team is in. And it's not just that the stars are not there, although that's certainly a big part of it, with Christian Pulisic in particular and all that controversy, which I will only say is of his own making entirely, and that's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. They haven't been winning lately. They finally beat Trinidad 5-0, and they played well enough, and people paid a little bit of attention. As we're recording, they're playing what, tonight, right? Thursday night?
Yeah, playing Saudi Arabia.
So if they win that game, which is on, we should say the Gold Cup is on traditional television, while the Club World Cup is only about half on traditional television. Because people in the U.S. don't really know what the zone is. If the U.S. gets back to winning, if the U.S. makes the Gold Cup final, by the time that final comes around, people will be paying attention, because people will be talking about the United States team again in quantity, given all they've been through. The best tonic, I mean, look, Mexico obviously is a big, is also the bell cow attendance-wise, interest-wise in the rest of the continent. But in the United States, with the state of the U.S. men's team, people have checked out a bit, and the only way they're going to fix that is by winning games.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I do wonder with the Gold Cup, though. It's every 2 years, and I think the Gold Cup, and CONCACAF has to decide what it's going to be and what it is. Yeah, because on the one hand, they want to say it's just like the Euros, it's just like Copa America, it's our continental or our confederation championship. It should be taken seriously. Everyone should be there, but it's held every 2 years. Apart from the African Cup of Nations, there's no other regional competition has gone down that path of every 2 years. So it raises the issue of whether or not, and it's FIFA who's introduced this new tournament into the market, to be clear. It's not CONCACAF who's created this situation. But by having it every 2 years in the crowded schedule and other things coming, obviously, we don't know if the Club World Cup is going to be back in the United States. It could be a tournament that is going to be held in Saudi Arabia. It could be held in Australia. It could travel around the world, and probably should do if it has a future. It should be played in Europe as well. But the CONCACAF Gold Cup, should it be every 2 years or should it be 4 years?
Oh, and mine, the next Gold Cup, as with 2015 and 2019 and will be during a Women's World Cup that everybody will be watching.
Right.
Should it be played every 2 years? No. Can they? There were always two reasons for doing it, right? One was a soccer reason, which was most of the nations in CONCACAF don't play year-round. So once they're out of World Cup qualifying, they have nothing to do for the next 4 years, except the Gold Cup. So that was part of it. That got fixed by launching the Nations League, because now all the teams are playing a lot more, and that forces the national federations to be doing things. And so that helps that, right?
Yeah.
The second part of it is that the Gold Cup is CONCACAF's biggest moneymaker by a mile and a half.
Right.
And it funds everything else they do for the rest of the time. Are they making enough money overall to get out of that? I doubt it. And part of the reason why I doubt it is that the CONCACAF Champions Cup is not of enough commercial value yet to make up the difference, I don't think.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think you're right. I think the financial aspect is the reason why it's every 2 years. It's not a competitive player development.
Because they don't need that. They used to need that. They don't anymore.
Yeah, they've got enough games with the Nations League. They've fixed that problem. You're right. I think it's a shame, really, because I love the Gold Cup in the same way as what we were talking about right at the top of the show about the cultural aspect of it. And I've been to games, traveled around in certain editions of the Gold Cup, and been at places like Cowboy Stadium when they had double header games on, and you meet Mexican families who are living in the Dallas area. I remember talking to one family, parents who came to the game with two kids, and the guy was looking at the stadium. He lived in Dallas, but he was in awe of the inside of Dallas Cowboys Stadium, and he was saying, I always wanted to come here. I watched the Cowboys on TV, but I could never afford to bring my family here. And this goes back to your point about getting ticket pricing right. The reason why that guy was there watching it was, yes, he was proud Mexican who wanted to support the national team, but also it was a chance for him to go to this great venue that he has zero realistic chance of doing or justification for financially when it's an NFL game. So I think there's a lot of great things about the Gold Cup. It just needs fixing in some ways, I think. It would be better every 4 years. Do you turn it in 1 year and just be upfront about it and make it more of a development tournament? I don't know.
I went to, I think this was back in 2017. I just looked it up. I went to a doubleheader up there, and it must have been on my own time, I think, because I don't think I was writing about anything that night. It was French Guiana. It was at what is now Sports Illustrated Stadium. It was Red Bull Arena at the time. The doubleheader was French Guiana versus Canada and Honduras, Costa Rica. And that was fun to just sit back and watch and take in. Lots of different fans. You get, Canada wasn't as good at that point, but French Guiana really was the minnow. And then you get all the Hondurans and the Costa Ricans throwing a party in the stands the rest of the night.
Yeah, I mean, we did see last week in the midst of all the Club World Cup opening nights, Guatemala fans almost packing out the LA Galaxy Stadium in Carson, California. And they do that everywhere in America. The Guatemala fans are absolutely incredible. Right. And we do see this time and time again. And I think from a sports business point of view, we talk a lot about demographics when we look at the soccer business and the potential for the game and so on. And I think this Club World Cup, just going back to it, and the Gold Cup to a degree as well, it is a reminder of just how central the Hispanic fan is to any soccer project in this country. And also, I get the feeling as well a little bit that the Premier League draws this audience on television in the States, which is not a massive number in the sports landscape, but in the soccer landscape, it's number one. But it's quite a passive fan base. Yeah, you have a small amount of people who are very excited and will go to Nashville for an NBC Premier League fan fest or something like that. But this is a small fraction of it. If there's 1 million people watching the Premier League at the weekend, it's overwhelmingly a passive TV audience. Whereas your Boca Juniors fan who's watching the Argentinian league on TV in a bar somewhere in Miami is not a passive fan.
Good luck if that game is on TV in the first place is part of the problem.
Yeah,
The South American leagues don't get a lot of exposure up here, which is part of it. But like we've had 2 Copa Americas in the United States now, right? For better or worse, 16 and 24. And every time people looked at it and said, oh, wow, the Brazilian fans and the Colombian fans and the Argentine fans, that's really cool. And here we are again in Philadelphia, for example. People say, oh, the Flamengo fans and the Esperance fans and the Wydad fans who are all over the city throwing a party. That's really cool. And it's been on the local news here every day. Obviously, it's been in my paper. One of the photos was on the front page of the paper this morning, not just the sports section. And then this happens over and over again as if they didn't know before that this was existed. My hope is that at some point it will finally get in their minds, no, we should pay attention to this and check it out the rest of the time too, because this is cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think there's a lot of positives come from this opening week of the Club World Cup and the Gold Cup. There's a lot going on. We'll be back with more chat about the soccer business, a lot of other things to go into, MLS and USL next week. But thanks very much for joining us, Jonathan. Really appreciate your time in what is a very busy schedule for yourself and for everyone. And have a great time.
Anytime, Simon. See you down the road somewhere.